We stopped at the light. Before you know it, a car just rolled up, started popping in the car. Didn't say nothing, didn't yell nothing, just pop, 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 pop.
6 shots fired on a cool Los Angeles night changed music forever. The king of New York was sitting in the front seat of a green truck, and in less than 5 seconds, he was gone. But the man sitting right behind him saw everything. He saw the blue suit, he saw the bow tie, he saw the eyes of the killer. This is not just another story about a drive-by shooting. This is the hour-by-hour account from the person who was closest to the tragedy, the calm before the storm. Everyone thinks they know why Christopher Wallace, the man the world knew as Biggie Smalls, was in Los Angeles. The headline said he was there to fuel the war between the East Coast and the West Coast. They said he was there to taunt Tupac Shakur's crew. But Lil Cease tells a different story. He explains that they had been in California for nearly 2 months before the shooting happened. They weren't hiding in hotel rooms with the lights off. They were living their lives. Biggie loved LA. He loved the weather and the women and the weed. For weeks, the crew moved around the city without any major problems. They went to clubs and video shoots and restaurants. The fans showed them love. People waved at them in traffic. It felt like the media was making up a war that didn't really exist on the streets. This false sense of safety is what made the tragedy possible. If they had felt like they were in a war zone, they would have moved differently. They would have been more careful, but they got comfortable. There was one major problem though. Biggie was hurt. Before they even got to Los Angeles, he had been in a bad car accident on the highway. Lil Cease was driving the car that day. It was a loaner car, a Chevrolet Lumina, because their main car was in the shop. The brakes failed and they crashed. Biggie's leg was shattered. That is why you see him walking with a cane in all the pictures from 1997. That broken leg is a detail that changed history. Because of that injury, Biggie couldn't run. He couldn't duck quickly. He was a sitting duck in the front seat of that truck. A warning from the Bay. Even though things felt cool in Los Angeles, there were cracks in the peace. Lil Cease remembers a scary moment that happened before the murder. It involved the rapper E40 and a trip to Sacramento. The crew got a call about a concert booking that seemed too good to be true. They started to head up north, but they got a phone call telling them to turn around. It was a trap. Biggie had given E40 a low rating in a magazine interview months earlier. On the West Coast, that was seen as a sign of disrespect. The concert was a setup to get Biggie in a vulnerable spot. They managed to squash that beef over the phone. Biggie and E40 talked it out like men, and E40 even sent his people to help escort Biggie safely. But it was a wake-up call. It showed everyone that words on a page could lead to guns in your face. The tension was real, even if the fans in LA were smiling. The night of the party, Saturday, March 8, 1997. The mood was celebratory. The Soul Train Music Awards had happened the night before. Biggie had gotten booed when he went on stage to present an award, but he didn't let it ruin his weekend. He was focused on his music. His new album, Life After Death, was about to drop, and he knew it was going to be a classic. That night, Vibe magazine was hosting a huge party at the Peterson Automotive Museum. This wasn't a hole-in-the-wall club. It was a fancy venue in the Miracle Mile district. Everyone who was anyone was going to be there. The guest list was full of stars. Aaliyah was there. Chris Tucker was there. The heads of major record labels were there. It was the place to be. Biggie wanted to look his best. He wasn't wearing a bulletproof vest. He didn't feel like he needed one. He was wearing a fresh outfit. Some people remember it as a green camo jacket, while others say he was decked out in designer gear from Carl Connie. He looked like a boss. He had his cane and his gold chain and his sunglasses. When he walked in, he was the center of attention. Inside the party, the vibes were good. The music was loud and the drinks were flowing. Lil Cease says they were just having a good time. They were dancing and talking to girls and celebrating life. There was no fighting. There were no mean mugs. It felt like a victory lap, but the party got too packed. There were too many people inside, and the fire marshal came in to shut it down. It was around 12:30 in the morning on March 9th. The lights came on and the music stopped. The security guard started telling everyone to leave. This is a dangerous moment in any club situation. When you push hundreds of people out onto the street at the same time, things get chaotic. You lose control of your surroundings. The convoy Biggie and his crew had a system for moving around. They didn't travel in just one car. They had a convoy. It was like a small presidential motorcade. The lead car was a white Chevrolet Blazer. That is where Sean Puffy Combs sat. He was the head of Bad Boy Records, and he always rode in the front. The second car was the one that mattered. It was a dark green GMC Suburban. This was Biggie's car. Because of his broken leg, Biggie had to sit in the front passenger seat. It was the only place where he could push the seat back far enough to stretch out his leg. He was a big man, nearly 400 pounds, and the cast on his leg was heavy. He was trapped in that seat. Lil Cease got into the back seat. He sat on the passenger side, right behind Biggie. Damian Butler, who they called D-Rock, sat next to Cease in the back. The driver was a man named Gregory Young, known as G-Money. There was a third car too, trailing behind them with more security. They pulled out of the parking garage of the museum and turned onto Wilshire Boulevard. The street was crowded with cars and people leaving the party. It was a warm night and the energy was high. The fatal mistake. They didn't get very far. They only drove about 50 yards. That's half a football field. They came to the traffic light at the corner of Wilshire Boulevard and South Fairfax Avenue. Puffy's car in the front made it through the light just as it was turning yellow. He sped up and crossed the intersection, but the green Suburban was a few seconds behind. The light turned red. G-Money hit the brakes and the truck came to a soft stop. Now the convoy was broken. Puffy was on the other side of the intersection and Biggie was sitting alone at the red light. Inside the truck, they were playing Biggie's own music. The song Hypnotize was blasting through the speakers. The beat was thumping and they were feeling good. Lil Cease looked out his window. He saw a group of women standing on the sidewalk. They recognized the car, or maybe they just looked good. Cease did what any young guy would do. He rolled down his window to talk to them. He wanted to shout out to them and see what they were doing. But here's the detail that haunts him. Biggie's window was down too. Maybe it was for the fresh air. Maybe it was to talk to the fans. But that window being down removed the only shield Biggie had. There was no glass between him and the street. The man in the blue suit. While they were flirting with the girls and listening to the music, a dark sedan pulled up slowly on their right side. It was a Chevrolet Impala SS. It didn't screech its tires. It didn't make a scene. It just crept up alongside the Suburban and stopped. Lil Cease was looking out the right side of the car. He had a perfect view. He looked right into the other car. He saw the driver. For years, people have speculated about who killed Biggie. Was it a gang member? Was it a hired hitman? Lil Cease saw him clearly. He wasn't wearing a bandana. He wasn't wearing a hoodie. He was dressed like a gentleman. He was wearing a blue suit, a white shirt, and a blue bow tie. This outfit confused everyone later. Cease told people a Muslim shot Biggie, but he didn't mean it was a religious attack. In their neighborhood, they used that word to describe the well-dressed men from the Nation of Islam who often did security for events. Cease was just describing the clothes. The shooter looked professional. He looked like someone who had been at the party. He looked calm. There was a moment of eye contact. Cease says the driver looked over. Biggie looked over. They saw each other. In that split second, the driver reached across his chest. He pulled out a blue steel 9mm handgun. He rested it on his arm or the windowsill, and he started to squeeze the trigger. 4 shots that changed history. The sound of a gun firing inside a car is deafening. It isn't like the movies. It is loud and terrifying. The shooter fired 4 shots. Lil Cease reacted on instinct. He saw the gun and he dove to the floor of the truck. He curled up into a ball, trying to make himself small. He thought the shooter was going to spray the whole car. He thought they were all going to die. The bullets flew through the open window and into the passenger door. The first bullet hit Biggie in the left forearm. It went into his arm and traveled down to his wrist. It stopped there. That bullet wasn't fatal. The second bullet hit him in the back. It missed all his vital organs and exited through his left shoulder. That bullet wasn't fatal either. The third bullet hit his left thigh. It went through his leg and grazed his scrotum. It was a painful wound, but it wasn't going to kill him. It was the fourth bullet that changed everything. This bullet entered his right hip. It traveled diagonally across his body. It was a devastating shot. It ripped through his colon. It tore through his liver. It pierced his heart. It finally stopped in his left lung. This one bullet destroyed almost every major organ in his body. The shooting stopped as quickly as it started. The dark Impala peeled off and sped down Wilshire Boulevard, disappearing into the night. Inside the Suburban, there was silence for a second. Then the screaming started. Lil Cease popped his head up from the floor. He checked himself. He wasn't hit. He checked D-Rock. He was okay. He checked the driver. He was okay. He looked at Biggie. Biggie was slumped forward. He was leaning over the dashboard. The car had rolled forward a little bit and bumped into the back of Puffy's car, which had stopped to wait for them. Lil Cease shouted his name. Big, big. But there was no answer. Puffy jumped out of the lead car and ran back. He ripped open the passenger door. Biggie was lying there, bleeding heavily. His tongue was hanging out of his mouth. His eyes were open but empty. Cease grabbed his hand. He squeezed it, hoping Biggie would squeeze back. He wanted a sign. He wanted a groan. He wanted anything. But the hand was limp. The race against time. They didn't call 911. They knew waiting for an ambulance would take too long. Puffy made a command decision. He told the driver to move over. He jumped into the driver's seat of the Suburban. The security team jumped in. They floored the gas pedal. They were heading to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. It was only a few miles away, but in Los Angeles traffic, it felt like a cross-country trip. They were running red lights. They were driving on the wrong side of the road. They were honking the horn and screaming out the windows. Lil Cease was sitting in the back seat the whole time. He was watching his best friend, his brother, bleeding out right in front of him. He remembers looking at Biggie's body bouncing with the movement of the car. He had a sinking feeling in his stomach. He knew. He tried to tell himself it would be okay, but deep down, he knew Biggie was already gone. They pulled into the hospital emergency bay with tires screeching. The hospital staff came running out, but there was a problem. Biggie was a massive man. He was dead weight now. It took Puffy, Cease, the security guards, and the doctors all working together to lift him out of the truck and onto the gurney. They wheeled him through the double doors and into the trauma room, the waiting room. Lil Cease was left standing in the hallway. He was covered in blood. His clothes were ruined. He was shaking from the adrenaline and the shock. He paced back and forth. He prayed. He bargained with God. Just let him live. Just let him make it. The doctors performed an emergency thoracotomy. That means they cut open his chest to get to his heart. They tried to massage his heart manually to get it beating again. They tried to stitch up the damage to his liver and his lungs. But the fourth bullet had done too much damage. There was no blood pressure. There was no pulse. At 1:15 in the morning, the doctors came out to the waiting room. They looked at Puffy and Cease and shook their heads. Christopher Wallace was dead. He was only 24 years old. Lil Cease collapsed. His legs just gave out from under him. He fell to the cold hospital floor and screamed. It wasn't just a rapper who died. It was the guy who took him out of the hood. It was the guy who bought him his first car. It was the guy who taught him how to be a man. The longest walk. The night didn't end at the hospital. They had to go back to the hotel. They were staying at the Westwood Marcus. Going back to that hotel room was like walking into a haunted house. Lil Cease opened the door to Biggie's room. It was exactly how he had left it a few hours earlier. Biggie's clothes were thrown over a chair. His jewelry was sitting on the dresser. His lyrics were scribbled on pads of paper scattered on the table. The smell of his cologne was still in the air. Seeing those things broke Cease down completely. It made it real. Biggie wasn't in the bathroom. He wasn't coming back to finish that verse. He was gone forever. Cease sat on the bed and cried until he couldn't breathe. Then the phone rang. It was the call no one wanted to make. They had to call Valletta Wallace, Biggie's mother. She was back in New York. Imagine getting that phone call in the middle of the night. Lil Cease had to talk to her. He felt like he had failed her. His job was to watch Biggie's back. He was supposed to be the little brother who looked out for the big brother. And now he had to tell her that her only son was coming home in a box. The controversy. In the days and weeks that followed, the story got messy. People started pointing fingers. There was a security guard named Gene Deal who was in Puffy's car that night. He started telling stories that contradicted what Cease saw. He claimed that Puffy knew something was going to happen. He claimed that the security team failed. Gene Deal and Lil Cease argued for years about the details. Deal grabbed onto Cease's comment about the Muslim shooter and tried to turn it into a conspiracy theory about the Nation of Islam. But Cease stood his ground. He explained over and over again that he wasn't identifying a religion, he was identifying a style of dress. He wanted the police to look for a man in a suit, not a man in a hoodie. Cease also shut down the rumors that Biggie was scared or hiding. He told everyone who would listen that Biggie was happy in those final days. He wasn't looking over his shoulder. He was planning his future. He was talking about buying a house in LA. He was talking about his next tour. The legacy. The funeral in Brooklyn was a scene straight out of a movie. Thousands of people lined the streets. They climbed on top of cars and light poles just to get a glimpse of the hearse. They blasted Hypnotize from boomboxes. It was a celebration of a king. Lil Cease rode in the limousine with the family. He looked out the window at the sea of people and realized how big his friend really was. Biggie wasn't just a guy from Brooklyn anymore. He belonged to the world. 2 weeks after the shooting, the album Life After Death was released. It went to #1. It sold millions of copies. It is considered one of the greatest albums of all time, but Lil Cease can barely listen to it. Every track reminds him of the studio sessions. Every lyric reminds him of the jokes they cracked while writing it. The murder of the notorious B.I.G. is officially unsolved. The Blue Impala was never found. The man in the bow tie walked away and vanished into the shadows. But thanks to Lil Cease, we know the truth of those final moments. It wasn't a grand conspiracy involving the government. It wasn't a complex military operation. It was a series of small, tragic mistakes. A broken leg that kept him in the front seat. A fire marshal who closed the party early. A traffic light that turned red at the wrong second. And a window rolled down on a warm night to say hello to a fan. Those small things added up to a tragedy that broke the heart of hip-hop. Lil Cease carries that weight every day, but he keeps telling the story so that the world never forgets the man behind the music.